All right, Catherine, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rachel, for that introduction. Hi, everybody. I'm attending today from my hometown, as Rachel said, of St. John's, Newfoundland, which I would like to respectfully acknowledge as the ancestral home of the Beothuk, as well as the Mi'kmaq, Innu, Inuit, and the South Inuit of this province. And I'd like to thank you for having me here today and for your interest, for showing up and learning about how you can use plain language to make your research more accessible. So just to let you know, I'm with People First of Canada, and that's a national nonprofit organization that works towards ensuring the full human and citizenship rights of people labeled with intellectual and developmental disabilities in Canada. Our priorities follow the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and these priorities include housing and deinstitutionalization, education, work and employment, and ensuring that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities have the right to their own legal capacity and decision making. Plain language is also a priority for People First of Canada and has been for a long time. Providing information in plain language is an accommodation right for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, just like door openers and ramps or American Sign Language is an accommodation for people with disabilities. It helps ensure they can be included. So along with being the Director of Communications for People First of Canada, I'm also currently serving as the chairperson for Accessibility Standards Canada's Technical Committee for Plain Language. Very appropriate for you here today. So the Plain Language Standard and many others are being developed through the Accessible Canada Act. And Canada is not the only one working on a plain language standard. If you may be aware that the International Standards Organization, ISO, is also working on a plain language standard and have been for the past few years. So that means within a few years' time, there should be a standard for folks to follow in Canada and internationally. And we're developing this standard under the Accessible Canada Act, and it's meant to remove barriers for people with disabilities. So, although I'm talking about information in any format, it could be written or in ASL or LSQ or Braille or any other format, I will use the word reader and audience to refer to the end user of the information, and document or information to refer to the documents. So first, just a quick word about literacy. In Canada, close to 50% of adults between 16 and 65 come in below the minimal level for literacy, and approximately 38% of Canadians between 16 and 25 are even lower than the minimal. But literacy is not a static, and it changes within people and populations. For example, youth and adults' literacy scores increase for each year of schooling they complete. Occupation and age also influence literacy proficiency. For example, 82% of Canadians aged 66 and over are at lower levels of literacy than the 16 to 65 age category. And some research shows that we lose literacy as we age. So there's millions of Canadians out there who cannot understand what the government and others are trying to tell them, never mind what they're supposed to do with that information. And that's where plain language helps. Plain language reaches a wide range of people with different literacy skills. So what is plain language? There are lots of definitions out there, and here's a few. Plain language is writing that is clear to the reader. Plain language is written with the reader in mind. Plain language information can be understood the first time it is read or heard. Plain language is easy to read, understand, and use. But the definition of plain language that's broadly used comes from the Plain Language Association International, and it is as follows. A communication is in plain language if its wording, structure, and design are so clear that the intended readers can easily find what they need, understand what they find, and use that information. Plain language writing has a lot of benefits. It reaches people who cannot read well. It helps all readers understand information. It avoids misunderstandings and errors. It saves time and money. And sometimes it can use less space depending on what you're doing with your plain language. So overall, a plain language approach to writing makes sure that you include many groups like people with disabilities and intellectual disabilities, people with low literacy, seniors, new Canadians, and others who may have barriers to language and printed language. So today we're going to look at the plain language process. So this is the basic process for writing in plain language. The first thing we do is identify the reader. Then we figure out the purpose of our document. Then we make an outline and organize it. Then we write the document, which is 3 little words which take up most of your time there. Then there's the design and layout of the document, and then testing and revising the document. So I'm just going to go through each one of these a little bit. So the starting point of your document is to identify the reader. We write differently for different groups of people. Knowing who the document is intended for will affect the way you write it. Knowing your audience, who your readers are, is the most important step in making sure your document is understandable and useful to your target group. So you start out by asking yourself questions that will help you identify your reader. It's a big list of them here. So the first one is, who is the document for? Who is my reader? What is the target group? What is my reader's literacy level? What is my reader's interest in the subject? Why are they reading the document? What is my reader's background and demographics? What is my reader's knowledge about the subject? What does the reader get from the document? What information does my reader need? What information can I leave out? What is the most important thing my reader needs to know so they can respond? You may not know all the answers to these questions, but you should know enough of them to have a decent idea of who your document is for and who your reader is. Additionally, make sure that you identify the reader's task if there is one. Let your reader know what they need to be aware of or what they need to do. Leave out any unnecessary information and concentrate on the important details. So after you've identified who the reader is, the next question is, what is the purpose of the document? There are many reasons for writing a document. You need to be clear in your purpose. Generally, we write to inform people, to persuade people, to explain information, to instruct, or to entertain. So if you narrow down the purpose of your document by asking yourself the following questions. What do I want to happen when people read my document? What do I want my reader to be able to do after they read my document? Do I want or need something specific? Do I want to achieve or prevent something? Do I want to change people's behavior? If I want to inform people, what do I want them to do with the information? Once you know the purpose of the document, it is easier to decide on the type of document you are going to create. We make many different types of documents, brochures, reports, letters, forms, presentations, manuals, policies, and more. After you decide the purpose and the type of document, you need to figure out what the reader needs to know to use the document. How will the reader use the information? What will be their response to the document? We give information to people because we want them to be aware or respond in some way. There is a purpose to our writing, and we want it to have an effect or cause an action. Ask yourself, what kind of response do I want from the reader? What do I want my reader to do because of this document? We generally want one of the following kind of responses. So we might be looking for an intellectual response. You want the reader to understand what you mean and to know the information. We might be looking for a physical response. You want the reader to take an action or to avoid an action or respond within a time frame. It could be an emotional response that you're looking for. You may be trying to build excitement or concern or interest or a sense of urgency or necessity through your writing. So when you identify the task you want the reader to do by using action words, provide direct instructions on what is expected. Describe the end result so that readers have a general idea of the document and its purpose. Structure your document with the reader's information needs and tasks in your mind. So you choose your words based on the outcome that you want to achieve. So you might use the words complete or mail or submit or copy or send or apply, but words that let the reader know what's expected from them in clear language. So you can repeat the same words and ideas if they're important to getting the reader to complete the task, and include examples if possible to show any important points. So from there, we move on to organizing and outlining your document. Organization is the key to a plain language document. You have to decide what information is most important to include and then include only that information. People read documents to get answers and information. They need to know something or how to do something, and they want to find out fast. Organize your document with this in mind. You can ask yourself the following questions. What is the most important thing you would want to know if you were the reader? What would help you find the information you need? So there's many ways you can organize your document, and it all goes back to the first two questions. Who is my reader, and what is the purpose of the document? But always organize in a way that makes sense to the reader. Be consistent in your organization of the document, and don't shift from one method of organization to another. You can see on the screen, there's many different ways you can organize your document. You can go step by step, you can go chronologically, you can go from order of importance, from general to specific, from specific to general, from new information to old information, from old information to new information, compare and contrast, provide a problem and a solution, provide a proposition and ask for support. There's many different ways we can outline our document. So once you have the outline figured out, then you should still organize to present the big picture before your details that you have. You should use headings and subheadings to break the document into sections. You should group related information together and avoid repetition, and review the document and the flow of information. So whether your document needs a table of contents or not, you should use headings and subheadings to organize your information. Headings and subheadings help people find information. They help make the document easier to scan. They make the organization of the document clear to the reader, and it gives useful information to the reader in the headings. So on the slide there are three kinds of headings you can use: question headings, statement headings, and topic headings. The headings help you chunk information and organize your document. Generally, headings are in boldface type and use a larger or different font than the rest of the text, so they stand out to the reader. Try to keep your sections so short. Short sections give you the opportunity to use informative headings. When you write short sections, each heading can give the reader information about the entire contents of the section. And make sure your headings and subheadings are informative and can guide the reader through your document. So now we are down to some of the writing. So writing, word choice, and vocabulary. We're going to take a quick walk through some of these. So words are the basic building blocks of communication. Make sure you choose the right word for the job. Use words with exact meanings instead of words that are vague or have more than one meaning. Grammar is the system and structure of language. The rules of grammar help us decide the order in which we put words and which form of a word to use. Usage means the way we use language, the way we put words and phrases together so that they have meaning. You don't have to be an expert in grammar to write in plain language, but having some knowledge can help. Your choice of words should be based on what will be more clear for the reader. You choose the clearest word possible to describe actions, objects, and people. Use familiar everyday words. Familiar words and common phrases will work best and be recognized by most readers. And use the simplest form of words. Choose verbs over verb noun phrases. Use concrete words rather than abstract words. That often means that you have to choose shorter words and older, more familiar terms, or several clear words instead of one complex word. But be consistent in what you call something. Avoid using two or more names for the same thing. That can be confusing to a reader. Use the same word or the same idea more than once if it's important. Your document might not be very exciting, but it will be very clear. Be consistent in style, language, and format. It helps the reader understand and navigate through your document. Plain language writing involves writing the way you speak, as if someone is asking you what you mean. Your choice of words should be based on what will be clearest for the reader. So we avoid jargon and we explain technical terms. So jargon are the words, phrases, and acronyms that are used in many occupations or in interest groups. These are terms and expressions that have limited meaning outside of the group or occupation. Jargon can cause problems for your reader and they may not understand it and they may miss important information. You should avoid using jargon and explain any technical terms that have to be used due to the subject matter of the document. You should also avoid trendy or temporary expressions. They may not be understood by your reader and they will date your document to a certain time frame. And we've all heard this one, avoid acronyms. Use acronyms carefully. Ask yourself if the reader is likely to know the acronym. Remember that not everyone may know what the letters stand for. Use the full proper term first and put the acronym in brackets behind it. Then you can use the acronym for the rest of your document when you want. Now we're going to look at abstractions. So abstract language is what we use when we talk about things that we can't see, touch, smell, taste, or hear. These are things like hope, justice, love, or honesty. Concrete language is what we use to talk about things that we can see, touch, smell, taste, or hear. These are things like a sports car, a banana, a black cat, a playing card, or jazz music. Abstract words are vague and can have different meanings to different readers. Concrete words give a clearer picture of your meaning. Look at the following abstract and concrete sentences. So the first one there with abstractions. The client contacted the department and stated that she wanted to connect with a social worker. When we remove the abstractions, it's much clearer. A woman called the department and asked for a social worker to call her back. We all need abstract language and terms from time to time, but it is best to use concrete terms and words wherever you can. The next on the list is avoiding turning verbs into nouns. So turning verbs or adjectives into nouns is called nominalization. A nominalization is the name of something that isn't a physical object, like a process or a technique or an emotion. Here are some examples of nominalizations and the words they come from. So you can see people will use demonstration when the original word is demonstrate, or failure when they could be using fail, difference instead of different. Avoiding nominalization will make your writing much clearer. Nominalized words are harder for people to understand. So another thing to avoid, and I believe the last in this little list, is noun strings. So chains of nouns are strings of two or more nouns used to name one thing. They're often difficult for a reader to understand. They lack connecting words such as of, for, about, in, or the possessive s that would show how the nouns relate to each other. So we have here, oh, I'm sorry, I missed a slide there. This is a sentence with nominalizations and without. The department conducted an investigation into the matter and has intentions to amend the existing policy. Taking the nominalizations out, it will be the department investigated the matter and intends to change the current policy. So now I'm going back to noun strings. And so here we have a noun string. The committee discussed the application fee price increase proposal. So at the end, we have 5 nouns in a row: application fee price increase proposal. In order to make that clearer, the sentence is rewritten with the committee discussed the proposal to increase the application fee, so the reader has a better chance to understand how these nouns are related to each other. Right here, we have an example of a very long noun string in a local newspaper headline. It reads as Main River Waterway Provincial Park Forest Access Road washed out. This is typically referred to as burying your lead. The important parts of the headline, the subject and the verb, do not appear until the very end, which is there's a road washed out. So this will be better written as Forest Access Road washed out in Main River Waterway Provincial Park. So whatever you do, try to avoid noun strings. It will make your writing clearer and easier for your reader to understand. So those are some word choices and vocabulary. And let's right now look at some sentences and paragraphs. So sentences follow a pattern and a word order, which is generally subject, verb, object. So the subject is the person, the group, or the thing doing the action in the sentence, and that's a noun. The verb is the action itself, and that's a verb. And the object is the person, group, or thing that the action is done to, and that's a noun. If I say Catherine gave an example, Catherine is the subject, gave is the verb, and example is the object. Sentences written in this order are easier to understand. Keeping the subject and verb close together helps the reader understand what the subject of the sentence is doing. Also, when you're writing sentences, try to keep them short. Readers can only take in so much new information at one time. Use short, clear, simple sentences for the most part. It is recommended that sentences should average about 13 words in length and that no sentence should be more than about 20 words long. But this is not a hard and fast rule, and these rules differ in different schools of plain language. But generally, if you're 30 words or over, it puts much more of a mental load on your reader to try to keep all that together. So the shorter the sentence is, generally the better. A variety of sentence lengths can also add interest to your writing. Readers can understand longer sentences if they are well written and use familiar terms. So break up long sentences with full stops. People understand full stops like periods, question marks, and exclamation points better than other punctuation marks such as a semicolon, colon, or a comma series. Sometimes you can link one related item in a sentence and still be clear, but avoid too much punctuation, like several commas or colons. This generally indicates more than one idea or concept in the sentence. So sentences. Don't overload sentences. Keep them clear and easy to read. Don't place a new idea in the middle of a sentence. If you have a related point you want to make, use another sentence. If you want to give some more details, use another paragraph. Sentences should be in a conversational tone. They should be simply constructed, limited to one idea, positive in tone, limited in punctuation, and without any unnecessary details. Put the subject and the verb close to the beginning of the sentence. Too much information between the subject and the verb makes it very difficult for the reader to figure out what the subject of the sentence is actually doing. Another consideration when you're writing sentences is the active and the passive voice. The active voice or active writing is about the way a sentence is put together. Active sentences are written the way we speak, in a conversational tone. The active voice refers to the way the action word, the verb, is used in a sentence. In the active voice, the subject does the action. In the passive voice, the subject receives the action. Both voices are grammatically correct, but the active voice is usually simpler and more direct. So you can see there, sentences in the active voice are written in this order, subject, verb, object, and sentences in the passive voice are written in this order, object, verb, subject. So more on passive sentences. The opposite of the active voice is the passive voice. This is when the object comes first and the subject comes last. Passive sentences have the subject receiving the action and often do not identify who is performing the action. Passive sentences sound formal. The following sentence is passive because the object comes before the subject and the verb. So the sentence, the application was completed by Sarah. The application is the object and it comes before the subject, Sarah, and it makes the sentence more difficult to understand and it makes it sound a little formal. The active voice is clearer and livelier and comes across as more personal and direct. You generally need fewer words to say the same thing in the active voice as you would in the passive voice. So you can identify passive sentences because they will have the following two elements: a form of the verb to be, for example, are, were, could be, or will be, and a verb in the past tense, and that's generally with an ed on the end. Passive sentences may also have a prepositional phrase with the word by, but this is not necessary to have passive sentences. In active sentences, the subject and verb are close together near the beginning of the sentence, but in passive sentences, the subject is near the end of the sentence. And although the active voice and active writing style is better to use overall, there are still times when you will need to use the passive voice. So you use the passive voice if you want to put distance between the person giving and the person receiving the information, when you don't know who the subject of the sentence is, or if you don't want to focus on the subject of the sentence, and when it doesn't matter who's doing the action. So now a quick look at paragraphs. The three most important principles that make effective paragraphs are as follows: writing a strong topic sentence that establishes the subject of the paragraph, using echo words, and echo words are consistent words for ideas and terms, and applying transitions to link sentences and paragraphs logically. Short paragraphs are easier for your reader to understand. The length of paragraphs is usually about 150 words in 3 to 8 sentences. That will be about 10 to 12 lines on a standard page. Paragraphs should generally be less than about 250 words. Vary the length of your paragraphs to make them more interesting. Using short paragraphs is a great way to create more white space in your document, and it gives you the opportunity to add more headings. You can use a one-sentence paragraph if that's what helps your document to be clearer to your reader. So in paragraphs, as in sentences, limit each paragraph or section to one topic or one idea. Each paragraph should start with a topic sentence that lets the reader know what may be in the rest of the paragraph. A good topic sentence draws your reader into your paragraph. Don't make readers process a lot of information before they get to your point. Having a good topic sentence helps readers skim your document. Good topic sentences and headings make it easier for your reader to see the organization of the document. And leave some white space between each paragraph, and if you can possibly manage it, avoid continuing a paragraph, a sentence, or a section over a page. You sometimes have to bring more than one idea into a paragraph. When you do, make sure that the ideas are easily understood. Complicated information or a discussion of several different ideas generally needs to be broken up into separate paragraphs to be easily understood. Use transitions to connect the ideas in one paragraph with the ideas in the next paragraph. Also, in your writing, it's good to use lists. So we use lists for a group of similar things. Just here on this slide is just some of the logistics with lists, with the bullets or arrows or any other small graphic to indicate each item in the list. Indent the list under the lead sentence to show how the information is chunked. Give instructions in the order you want them done. Use numbers if appropriate, and use the same verb or noun form throughout the list. It's easier for the reader to understand when the sentences or the items in the list are in the same format. And lists are also a great way to increase the white space of your document. We have a couple of other considerations when you're writing. One way to make your writing more accessible is to write directly to the reader. Use personal pronouns such as you, I, we, us, and our to speak to your reader, but don't mix up your points of view. Also write in a positive tone. Write your message in a positive tone where possible. Use positive words to make your point. Then, in our plain language process, we are at the design phase. So layout and design refers to the table of contents, the headings and subheadings, the text, its size, font, color and contrast, spacing, graphics, illustrations, tables, and alternate text, as well as physical and electronic document considerations. So design is an important part of developing a good layout for an effective document. Documents that are easy on the eye are easier to understand. Design elements highlight important points and ensure your reader gets the most from your information. So a table of contents helps the reader to navigate your document and to find specific pieces of information. Headings and subheadings help the reader to see how the information is organized. When you use text, try to choose plain standard text like Times New Roman or Arial. If you use more than one font, try not to use more than 2 fonts in your document. When we do plain language with People First of Canada, we have our text in 14-point font standard. For the reading part, our headings are between 16 and 18-point font. We also avoid underlining and block capitals. When we want to draw attention to a word, we use bold or italics. The text should also have a good contrast, a high contrast with the background, whether it's on a screen or on a piece of paper. So you would have black ink or deep dark blue ink on white, or you would have on the screen dark blue ink on cream or black on white, which is the highest contrast. Spacing, you should leave more white space between paragraphs and around headings and any graphics. Be aware of different text font sizes and how they're spaced, the kerning of certain fonts. They can make letters look like they're running together for certain ones, or they can give too much space that makes letters look orphaned from the rest. So be aware of the kerning of your font that you've picked. And avoid using justified text. The big square block is very difficult for people. Ragged right is how plain language is always presented in layout. With the graphics, use pictures, tables, and diagrams if they help. Provide good titles and descriptions as well as alternate text. Use tables instead of columns and make sure graphics are clear in print or on the screen. Some of the graphics you may use on screen will not translate very well to print if you're trying to do that. Like I said earlier, avoid breaking up information. If you can avoid it, avoid spreading a sentence, a section, a paragraph over, breaking it over a page to the next one. Printed documents, use good quality paper. Don't use any watermarks behind them. When you have electronic documents, don't have any flashing images or any watermarks behind the text on the screen. And then that brings us down to the last part of the plain language process, which is testing and revising your document. So I have a little chart there that shows some of the best-selling authors and what reading grade levels their books are written at. There are often differences between what grade levels groups consider to be plain language. Some use grade 6 to 8 reading levels, some use grade 6 to 7 to 9, sorry. And at People First of Canada, we use between grade 5 and 7, and we average out at grade 6 as our goal when we're writing. You can see there, if you've got any of your favorite authors, Stephen King is there, and it's nice to know he writes at a grade 6 level. So his books are accessible to lots of people. Ernest Hemingway is in the first spot with just over grade 4. And if you've read any Hemingway, you know he writes in very short sentences, very clear, very direct. Are you still looking, Madeline?
I find this very interesting.
So testing your document is an important part of the plain language process. The information you get from testing can save time in answering questions about your document later. It is important to test and revise your document before it's finalized. So here are some ways you can test your document. The first way we all know is reading it out loud. It's a tried and true method of testing your document. This forces you to read every word rather than skimming over it. You can also try reading your document from the end to the beginning. You start with the very last sentence and end with the first sentence. I don't mean that you read the sentence backwards. You read the sentence in its right order, but you start with the last sentence. This will help you pick up any errors and any unnecessary repetitions in your document. Have a coworker, colleague read and review your document. A coworker is a good person to ask to review your document. They most likely have an understanding of what you are trying to achieve with your document and may be able to offer help and insights into making it better. You can also use a computer to test for spelling and grammar to help make your document a bit better. But ultimately, the reader is the best judge of whether or not your document is easy to read and understand. But you can use a computer to help. Most word processing software, like Microsoft Word, comes with built-in functions to check your spelling and grammar. You can use these to find common mistakes or misspellings in your document. Microsoft Word will also give you some information on the readability of your document and the number of passive sentences. But remember, computer grammar and even spelling suggestions are not always correct. In fact, there are times they will suggest changes that are absolutely wrong. So use these programs, but never only as your only testing and revising tool. People who actually read your document are ultimately the best judges of its clarity and its content. You can also use online readability tools. There are many of these. I have my own favorite that I use on every document when I'm analyzing it, but that's as far as it usually goes. So the readability refers to how easily written information can be read and understood. When you use these tools, you can input your text and get all the readability test scores on your document. These are good tools as guidelines, but again, don't rely on these exclusively. They only test the text. They don't test the content, the layout, or any other design elements of your document that you may have in there that makes it in a more plain language format. Then there's also focus groups. This is the gold standard for testing. We often write documents that are more for ourselves than for our readers, so it's important to get feedback from people who are likely to use your document. Try to do a focus group on your document. Test to see that people will understand it quickly and easily. People who know nothing about your area are sometimes the best at spotting unclear text. It is also important to test your document with some of the people who are likely to use it. Testing may save you money, time, and energy in answering questions or in printing corrections later. At People First, when we translate a document into plain language, it is always tested with our members, and they are paid for their work. Our members have varying levels of literacy, and they test documents for comprehension and navigation. They know when a document is difficult, and they know when it is easy to read and understand. Their feedback greatly informs our plain language translations. Real readers and testers should also inform your plain language process. And that brings us to the end of the plain language writing process. Many people find that plain language writing in plain language is frustrating and difficult, but the rewards are definitely well worth it. And I do want to just say that everybody makes mistakes and that keeping practicing and keeping trying will make you better at it. And you can always rest easy that you didn't make any of these mistakes. You just want to take a little glance through. We have 1 million people getting shot to save on loans. It's not quite clear. My personal favorite is we hate math, say 4 in 10, a majority of Americans. The human brain is still evolving, says scientists. And a great one with a picture of an Illinois executive who's entering the witness protection program along with his name. And the Queen Mother tried to help abuse a girl, but I believe she tried to help abused girl. And the lack of the D didn't make the Queen Mother look very good in that headline. So I think we're exactly on time. Thank you very much for your interest, and I look forward to your questions.